right, so buckle up, everyone, because today we are diving deep into a seriously wild theory about the JFK assassination.
We're talking about Roger Stone's book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. This book is packed with some pretty explosive claims about Lyndon B. Johnson.
Oh, and don't forget about the mafia and even the CIA.
Oh, yeah, we're going there, too. It's going to be a fascinating ride trying to figure out if Stone's arguments hold water. I mean, he's painting a very, very dark picture.
Yeah, and what's interesting is how he goes beyond just pointing fingers at the usual suspects.
Right.
He really digs into the whole power structure of the time. He looks at how LBJ's ambition played a role.
Right.
The Kennedys' relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And, the shadowy world of covert ops and how they all might have collided in Dallas.
So let's start with LBJ. I mean, Stone paints him as this almost Shakespearean figure, right? Like totally consumed by this lust for power.
Yeah, he was definitely an ambitious guy, no doubt about that. He went from being a school teacher in rural Texas to one of the most powerful people in the Senate.
Yeah.
And let's just say he didn't always play by the rules to get there.
Yeah. And Stone even brings up this whole Box 13 incident, which it honestly sounds like it's straight out of House of Cards.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so picture this. It's the 1948 Senate election.
Okay.
LBJ's in the super tight race with Quick Stevenson, and it all comes down to these few votes in one precinct.
Okay.
Now, this precinct is controlled by this guy, George Parr. He was like this old school political boss.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Enough votes magically appear in Box 13 to give LBJ the win.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Most people believe it was just straight up voter fraud. Parr likely pulled some strings, but, nothing was ever proven.
So right off the bat, we're seeing this pattern of LBJ being willing to bend the rules, maybe even break them.
Yeah.
To get what he wants. And then Stone basically argues that this drive for power led him to orchestrate Kennedy's assassination.
That is Stone's central claim, and it is definitely a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He links LBJ to all these powerful figures, like Texas businessmen who got rich off government contracts.
Right.
Even some organized crime figures.
It's almost like this twisted version of the American dream, right?
Yeah.
Claw your way to the top no matter who you're hurt. But, I mean, how much of Stone's evidence actually holds up?
Yeah, that's the big question. I mean, he points to financial dealings, meetings that supposedly happened, and even guys like Mac Wallace, who Stone claims was a hitman for LBJ. But some of this evidence is pretty circumstantial.
Right.
There are definitely other ways to interpret these events that don't involve, a conspiracy to kill Kennedy.
It's important that the listener understands we're presenting Stone's theory here, but it's definitely controversial.
For sure.
We're not saying this is the absolute truth. What we're doing is exploring his arguments and the evidence.
Exactly. You've got to think critically about what Stone's saying.
Right.
And consider other points of view as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got LBJ, this super ambitious politician with a shady past.
Mm-hmm.
But Stone doesn't stop there. He pulls the Kennedys into this whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it gets even more complicated.
Way more complicated. Because he claims they were involved with the mob.
Yeah.
Stone says their ties to organized crime go way back, all the way to their grandfather.
Wow.
Honey Fitzgerald, he was this big-time political boss in Boston.
Uh-huh.
And then he claims that Joe Kennedy Sr., JFK's dad, made his fortune through dealings with the mafia and used those connections to help his son's political careers.
I mean, it's almost too crazy to believe, like it's right out of a movie. What specific examples does he give?
Well, one example is JFK's alleged affair with Judith Exner, who was also involved with mob boss Sam Giancana. It's definitely an interesting detail, but the nature of their relationships and how much they played into JFK's political life is still up for debate.
And what about Robert Kennedy? I mean, he was the attorney general, wasn't he, going after the mob?
Right, that's what makes it so complicated.
Yeah.
Stone argues that Robert Kennedy actually used those mob connections to help his brother get elected. And then when he became attorney general, he turned around and started cracking down on them.
Oh, wow.
It was a super risky move, and he definitely made some enemies.
Yeah. So we've got LBJ's ambition, the Kennedys' ties to the mob, and now Stone throws the CIA into the mix.
Oh, yeah, it's getting good.
This is starting to feel like a spy novel. What was their role in all of this?
Stone says that the CIA, under pressure to get rid of Fidel Castro, got entangled with the mafia. They used guys like Giancana and Johnny Rosselli for these covert ops.
Okay.
And after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, there was a lot of anger towards Kennedy within the CIA.
Yeah. So Kennedy was making enemies everywhere, within his own administration, with organized crime, even within the intelligence community.
Yeah.
It sounds like the perfect recipe for disaster. And Stone saying LBJ was at the center of it all.
Right. According to Stone, it was all a carefully planned plot. LBJ, the mob, angry CIA folks, anti-Castro Cubans, all with their own reasons for wanting Kennedy gone.
That's a huge claim, and I bet the listener's wondering what evidence Stone has to back it up.
Right. We're going to have to dig into that in part 2. So let's get into some of the specifics that Stone uses to back up his claims. One of the most interesting ones is this story about Rose Cherami.
Oh, yeah. Rose Cherami. She sounds like a character straight out of a movie.
Right.
A prostitute who knew about the assassination beforehand. What's the deal with her? How much does Stone rely on her story?
Well, Stone says that Cherami claimed she overheard conversations about the assassination while working at this motel.
Oh, wow.
A motel that a lot of mobsters hung out at. She even named Jack Ruby as being involved. And we all know what happened to him.
Yeah, crazy. So she's claiming to have this inside knowledge, but she was a prostitute. I mean, how reliable could she really be? Yeah. And did anyone even take her seriously back then?
That's just it. Stone uses her story to show how easily evidence that went against the lone gunman idea could have been dismissed.
Right.
He thinks because of who she was, her story was never really investigated.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if there were other people like her who knew things but were ignored because they weren't considered credible.
Exactly. It definitely makes you question how biases might have shaped the whole investigation. Stone also points to the death of Henry Marshall as another piece of this puzzle.
Wasn't he the investigator who died in a really weird way while looking into Billy Soliti's? That was one of LBJ's buddies, right?
Yeah, Estes was involved in that huge cotton scandal, and Marshall was getting too close to the truth. Stone suggests that LBJ might have wanted to shut Marshall up.
To protect himself.
Yeah, he didn't want his own career to be ruined.
And Stone's saying this wasn't a one-time thing. He talks about this guy, Mac Wallace, as LBJ's go-to for getting rid of problems. Who was he exactly, and how does Stone link him to all this?
Wallace was a pretty shady character. Violent past. Stone says he was LBJ's hitman, basically. The guy who took care of anyone who posed a threat.
Oh, wow.
He even connects him to the assassination itself.
Wait, really? How does he do that?
He focuses on this fingerprint that was found on a box in the sniper's nest in the Texas School Book Depository. It was later matched to Mac Wallace.
Okay, that's pretty big. But a fingerprint doesn't mean he was the shooter, does it? I mean, couldn't he have been there some other time and just left it?
Right. It's circumstantial. It raises questions for sure, but doesn't really answer them.
Right.
Stone uses it to say that LBJ had his people at the scene, but, you know, it's up to the reader to decide if they buy that.
So Stone's saying that LBJ had a reason to do it. He had connections to people who could have pulled it off.
Yeah.
And maybe even had someone right there at the scene. But what about after the assassination? What happened right away?
Stone claims that LBJ took charge immediately, even before he was officially president. He insisted on being sworn in right there on Air Force One, before they even left Dallas.
He didn't waste any time. Why the rush, according to Stone?
Stone thinks LBJ wanted to look strong and in control. He also wanted to manage how the story was told. He was already thinking about how the investigation was going to go and who was going to be in charge of it.
And of course, Stone brings in J. Edgar Hoover, the head honcho at the FBI.
Oh, yeah.
What was his role in all this?
Stone paints Hoover as a major player in the whole cover-up. He says Hoover, with his massive files on everyone and his love of using that info to his advantage, he saw LBJ as someone he could manipulate.
So it was a win-win for both of them.
Right. LBJ gets to be president and Hoover gets to keep his power and influence. But how did they actually control the investigation? Stone says Hoover used his influence to make sure the Warren Commission stuck to the lone gunman story. Even if it meant ignoring or burying evidence that pointed in other directions.
Right.
He even talks about Gerald Ford, future president, member of the Warren Commission.
Wow.
He actually changed the official report to fit the single bullet theory better.
Hold on. A future president messing with the report on JFK's assassination? That's a huge accusation.
It is, and it makes you wonder who was really calling the shots and what they were trying to hide.
It's mind-blowing to think that something like that could have been covered up for so long. But Stone keeps adding more and more to this whole thing. He brings up Clint Murchison, too, the Texas oil guy. What was he doing in all of this?
Stone claims that Murchison was really tight with LBJ and was a key player in setting up a secret meeting the night before the assassination.
A secret meeting?
Yeah, it was supposedly at Murchison's mansion. People from the oil industry, the CIA, even some mobsters were there.
It sounds like something out of a spy movie. What was the point of this meeting, according to Stone?
He thinks they finalized the details of the assassination plot there. Murchison, with all his money and influence, helped make it happen.
So we've got LBJ, J. Edgar Hoover, Clint Murchison, McWallace, even rumors about George H.W. Bush. It's a lot to take in. But is Stone's whole theory even believable? Could something this big really be kept secret for this long?
That's the question everyone's asking. Stone tells a good story, but it's just his take on things. There are definitely other theories out there. It's important to look at those too.
Right. We're not saying this is the gospel truth. We're just exploring a really complex and controversial theory. The listener has to weigh the evidence and decide for themselves.
Exactly. Stone's book is just a starting point for looking into the Kennedy assassination and all the stuff that might have been going on behind the scenes.
It reminds us that history is complicated. The truth can be hard to find, especially when powerful people are involved.
And even after all these years, the Kennedy assassination still fascinates people. Because there are so many unanswered questions. We'll get into those questions and the impact of this event in our next segment.
We've been going over all these theories from Roger Stone about the JFK assassination. And man, it's a lot to think about. Did Stone talk about how all this affected people close to JFK, like Bobby Kennedy?
Oh yeah, he does. Stone makes Bobby out to be very suspicious of LBJ right from the start. He felt like the official investigation was messed up and maybe even a cover-up. Can you imagine dealing with that grief and then on top of it thinking your brother's death wasn't what they said it was?
Man, that's just awful. Did Stone say anything about what Bobby would have done about it if he had the chance?
Yeah, he claims that Bobby told some people he was going to reopen the investigation if he became president in '68.
Wow.
He felt like he had to find out the truth, not just for his family, but for everyone.
Which makes it even more tragic that he was assassinated, too. If you believe Stone, it's like another piece of the conspiracy.
Yeah, it's a pretty scary thought, right? Stone suggests that because Bobby wanted to find out the truth, he might have become a target, too. Especially if powerful people were involved in JFK's death and didn't want anyone digging around.
It's heavy stuff. Speaking of heavy stuff, Stone also talks about all these weird deaths connected to the JFK assassination. It's like if you knew too much, you ended up dead.
Stone uses that a lot to support his idea of a cover-up. He goes into detail about how all these witnesses and suspects died, a lot of them in really suspicious ways, like that pilot, David Ferry.
Oh, yeah. He was supposedly involved in smuggling guns for those anti-Castro Cubans.
Right. Ferry died just a few days before he was supposed to testify before Congress about the assassination.
They said it was suicide? Right. But Stone thinks there's more to it.
Yeah, Stone thinks he might have been killed to keep him from talking, and that's just one case. There are so many strange deaths around the Kennedy assassination. It's creepy, to say the least.
It's like a mob movie. You know too much and you end up sleeping with the fishes. But one thing I noticed about Stone's book is he doesn't just blame people. He tries to explain why they would do it.
Yeah, that's what makes his story interesting, even if it's controversial. He lays out reasons why different people would have wanted Kennedy dead.
Right.
For LBJ, it was ambition. He wanted to be president. For the mob, it was because Robert Kennedy was coming after them.
Right.
For the CIA, maybe it was because JFK didn't want to get more involved in Vietnam.
So Stone's basically saying all these different groups with their own reasons all came together to kill JFK. It's a pretty complicated theory. So after all this, what's the main point for our listener? What makes Stone's book important, even if you don't believe everything he says?
I think what Stone does, whether you agree with him or not, is he makes you think about history in a different way. You know, to question the official story and realize that powerful people often do things we don't know about. The JFK assassination is a big scar on America, and Stone's book kind of rips it open again.
He definitely likes to shake things up. So does Stone actually answer the question, who killed Kennedy?
Well, he says it was LBJ, but he also points at a whole bunch of other powerful people. He doesn't have like a smoking gun or anything, but he tells a story that makes you want to investigate more. Makes you think that maybe what we think we know about history isn't the whole truth.
Yeah, it makes you realize that the past isn't really over and done with, and sometimes finding the truth is a really long and twisted journey.
Exactly, and if you keep looking into this, keep an open mind. Look at different perspectives, and don't be afraid to ask the hard question.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the JFK assassination and Roger Stone's crazy theories. We'll be back next time with another interesting topic to explore. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep searching for the truth, wherever it takes you.
Loved this video? Smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And don't forget to order the book, link below.